With the premiere of Netflix's new TV series, Fallout, right around the corner, I and my usual group of friends find ourselves once again putting down our controllers and picking up our dice to venture back into the wasteland. Which of course brought me back to my last encounter with Fallout as a tabletop RPG. Fallout, a post-nuclear RPG, the official licensed game by Modiphius Press. A game that had so much promise, and yet turned out to be so terrible. With that in mind, I'm a long-time Fallout fan, and a veteran game master with over 40 years of experience and nearly 100 titles under my belt. And this is my brutally honest review of Fallout, a post-nuclear RPG. So let me start by saying, accurately and faithfully adapting an existing IP to RPGs is a very hard thing to do. Only a handful of game companies in the past have ever done it successfully. And while there are hundreds of titles out there, very few of them are actually worth playing. That's because the games are usually developed by one of two different groups of people. Either actual fans of the game who are saddled with ridiculous intellectual property licenses that limit what they can actually create or do in the game, or Steve from marketing, who thought pushing out a trendy new RPG will expand the company's IP reach and tap a new potential market. In essence, both these scenarios are a recipe for disaster, and what seems to work best is when both the developer and the IP holder hold equal weight in the creation and work hand in hand to create something that's truly unique and new. Unfortunately, that didn't happen here, and if you're watching this video because you're wondering if this game would be the next RPG love of your life, the answer is probably sadly no. As it's abundantly clear, Steve from marketing had his fingers all over this title. So with that warning thrown out, let's go ahead and start the review. First of all, when you judge an RPG book, you have to actually judge it by the traits and qualities you need in order to actually play and run a game. That means three different qualities. 1, the physical quality of the book. Is it good quality? Have evocative artwork, etc., etc. 2, the layout of the rules. Are they easy to follow, to find, well organized, etc.? Is the game written more from a standpoint of a rules manual, teaching players how to play, or a reference document, giving details for experienced players to quickly and easily look things up? And number 3, an actual playable game. The actual rules of the game, how effective they are, and how well they replicate the stories and feelings of the setting of the world they're set in. So let's start with the first category, and the only one Modiphius doesn't completely drop the ball on: the physical quality of the book. See, the book itself is actually really good quality. Heavy bound, glossy pages, strong cover, evocative art, simply a work of beauty. And if you wanted to buy this book simply as a tchotchke or shelf stuffer, you couldn't go wrong. What I'm trying to say is the graphic artists, the art director, the layout people all did an excellent job on this product. Everything from the page layout to the artwork is beautiful. Even such things as color choices and font designs are all focused around capturing the retrofuturistic mid-century modern look that the pre-war world of Fallout is famous for. With that in mind, this book is a solid 8 out of 10 for physical quality alone. As while it is a work of beauty, it also doesn't add anything new. You're not going to find any new art or lore in this book. Instead, everything in here appears to be mostly repurposed concept art from Bethesda themselves. So while bravo guys, an 8 it is. And with that in mind, we now get to the second quality: layout. Not the page layout, but the rules layout. Or as I said, how easy is it to use this book? And unfortunately, this is where this game book veers right off the road and starts to drive right for a cliff. Because the rules layout in this game are atrocious. You see, when you write an RPG manual, you write it for one of two audiences. Either inexperienced players who've never played the game before, in which case you write your book as a manual, one that takes them through every concept and idea and approaches it from a rules-light standpoint. Teach them all the ideas as they go along. Or you approach your game from an experience point of view, as a reference manual, with codified crunchy rules, neatly laid out and organized in a complete and orderly fashion. The one thing you don't do is try to write for both. And that's what they tried to do here, and failed at miserably. Instead, this manual swings wildly back and forth from these two extremes, with little attention paid to which audience they're actually talking to. It lays out important rules in a vague, rules-light manner, before bombarding players with long chapters about inconsequential minutiae. This means new players will be confused and overwhelmed, while experienced players will be frustrated. In other words, as a primer for new players, this book is terrible. And as a rules reference for experienced players, this book is functionally broken, as you'll find yourself having to flip back and forth from section to section just to confirm the most basic rules clarification. Which is why the internet is crawling cheat sheets, rules references, and programs, all to assist the game master. Not to make things simpler and more convenient, but simply to make the game playable. Which is why for layout and design, this game is a solid 5, barely functional. Finally, we get to the rules. And like I said before, if the layout is when the product just veered off the road, this is when it goes right off the cliff and sails into infinity. Because it's clear, this is not a game, it's a novelty. It's a Funko Pop of dog meat, or a plastic Pip-Boy you stick your phone into. Or better yet, a limited edition of Quantum Nuka-Cola that lights up and sits on a shelf. Designed to look cool, but never actually meant to be drunken. You see, the rules are all over the place, and they veer wildly from the vague to the tediously minutiae, and it's clear that both parties in this title wanted something completely different. Bethesda wanted a game that included all the rules from its video games in the title. And Modiphius Press just wanted to punt and backfill with its existing 2D20 rule set. And what we got because of it is functionally broken. You see, Fallout was originally written to simulate an RPG game, and all the trappings of RPG like perks, skills, and attributes already exist in the title, which is perfect if you want to use those trappings as a springboard to write a new functional set of rules. But as I said, Modiphius Press didn't want to do that. They just wanted to use their regular 2D20 rules and force the Fallout system into their existing rule system. And that's where things start to go off the rails. Because while Fallout is written around the trappings of RPG, it's still a video game. And video games and RPGs operate under completely different sets of rules. In other words, many of the very basic rules you need to play an RPG aren't part of the Fallout rules. Why? Because they're not things the character is supposed to do, they're things the player is supposed to do. Things like searching, navigating, exploring, noticing clues, even acting when surprised, are all skills the player is supposed to have, not the character. So those rules don't exist in the Fallout rule set. Which wouldn't bother a good game developer, as they would simply just add those rules. But Modiphius chose not to. Instead, as I said before, they punted and just forced all those roles under other skills. Sorry, did I say other skills? I meant skill. Because apparently the only skill they could find in the original Bethesda list that vaguely was appropriate for most of these things was survival, which they use for everything. You can literally master half the roles in the game simply by maxing out your survival skill. Here's the thing, if that was the worst decision they made, this game would be easily fixable. Unfortunately, it just goes downhill from there. You see, the basic 2D20 rule system is the attribute plus skill roll system. Essentially what you do is a player adds their skill to their attribute and attempts to roll under that number on a pair of 2D20s. Every successful die is counted as a success toward the difficulty of the task. Get enough successes and succeed. Pretty easy, right? And more importantly, easy to translate Fallout, which has both skills and attributes, into the 2D20 system. I mean, if you're an amateur game designer, this is a no-brainer. Just take your attribute system, add some skill points to it, and voila, you're done. Move on. No changes need to be made at all. Like I said, if you're an amateur, Modiphius isn't supposed to be amateurs. When you look at Fallout's attribute system, the specials, let me start off, it's actually a really good attribute system. It ranges from 1 to 10 and covers all the basic attributes, from strength to luck. And if you're using it in your game system, you probably can go wrong. It's actually a really good system. But here's the problem. The attributes are weighted 1 to 10. And rather than changing that, Modiphius just went with it, which doesn't sound like a bad thing until you remember Modiphius' 2d20 system has a hard cap of all rolls of 16. That means if your attributes range from 1 to 10, your skills have to have a hard cap of 6, which is what they do here. And this starts to create a cascade of problems. First of all, because the skills only range from 1 to 6, everything's unfairly weighted toward attributes. That means high attribute scores are far more important than your skill scores, which isn't the way Fallout's supposed to work. But minor problem, right? Well, no, it gets worse. Because skills are so low, you can cap out individual skills by level 4. In fact, you can cap out skills every 3 levels. Alright, fine, you're capping out early. That's not a huge deal. The attributes are more important, like you said anyways, right? It's not like that's going to cause any problems. No, because it causes the worst problem of all. Because see, once again, this is a skill plus attribute system. Which means if you're making rolls, every single roll has to fall under a skill. Everything, and I mean everything, has to be a skill roll of some time. Which means you have to find an appropriate skill. And remember, Modiphius just lifted Fallout's existing skill list, which is heavily incomplete because it's not an actual RPG skill list. Which means a lot of things simply aren't covered. I want you to look at the things that happened during my first session alone and tell me, what would you roll? Gambling. How to survive eating poison food? How to spot a synth hiding in a group of mannequins? Resisting mind control. How about recalling where a chief petty officer fits in the ranking system of the US military? Now, if we'd weighted the attributes slightly differently, say 1 through 8, we could solve all these problems. Why? Well, first of all, skills and attributes would be weighted equally. Secondly, skills would take longer to cap out. Not that much longer, but still take longer. But thirdly, and most importantly, we can make other rolls, say attribute plus attribute rolls, because all these things are really attribute checks. Gambling, I don't know, perception plus luck, surviving eating poison food, endurance plus luck, noticing the synth, perception plus intelligence, mind control, intelligence plus endurance. You get the idea. But here's the thing, Modiphius didn't do that. They just punted and used the existing skill list because I guess they thought it would be thematic, which meant that every single one of these rolls had to use survival. I'm not kidding. When we looked it up, that's for almost every single one of these rolls they wanted us to use. Well, except the chief petty officer thing, in which case, I'm pretty sure if the rules developers were in the room with us when we asked that question, they would have pulled the fire alarm and fled the building, because they were half-assing it all through this. Basically what I'm saying, the basic functional rules, the way they're implemented, need a rebalance. And yes, any good GM can do that, but they shouldn't have to. That was the game designer's job. Here's the thing, if this is where the lazy backfilling stopped, this game could actually be pretty workable, and I'd give it a passing 6. And would be a nice rules-light game. But it doesn't, and it gets worse and worse from here. Let me explain. You see, Modiphius just continued to backfill more and more video game rules into the game from here. And as I said before, video game rules and role-playing games are two completely separate genres with different priorities and different rules. Role-playing games are focused on things like problem-solving, clever thinking, and role-playing. Video games are about boosters, power-ups, and accounting. Which is fine if Modiphius had stopped and just kept the rules general and vague. But instead, they decided to dive headfirst in and double down on all the mechanics that Bethesda handed them from the video game, which are all next to useless in a role-playing game. Because anything Bethesda didn't have rules for is now left vague and hand-waved. But anything they handed them rules for is tracked and calculated into excruciatingly minutiae detail. I'm talking about things like how hungry you are, or whether or not you took a nap, or how many ounces each one of your bullets weigh. All are tracked and calculated. Rules as written, whether or not you stopped and had a sandwich for lunch, is more important to the game than things like good strategy. Literally, pages and pages of complex rules are dedicated to things that any good game master is just going to end up hand-waving, simply because they don't matter. Meanwhile, important things the game is supposed to handle are just sort of hand-waved and shrugged at, as they hand you a note that says, "Wing it." Okay, so they wasted a lot of space with video game mechanics. You can ignore it, it's not that big a deal, it's not like it functionally changes anything. No, apparently it does. Because, remember, video games and RPGs are not the same thing. Video games are all about buffs and boosters, which is what this game has in spades. And I don't mean things like perks and powers. I mean trivial things, like snacks. Doing things like drinking Coca-Cola gets you a buff. Eating Rad Roach for lunch gets you a buff. Wearing a nice suit? Buff. Nice suit has a hat? Double buff. Everything from Lucky Charm your players carry in their pocket to the Pip-Boy game they played before they started an adventure will all be testing simply random buffs at your players constantly in the most inconsistent manner and forcing you to look them up over and over again because, of course, your players are going to want to use them. So, you drink a whiskey? That's a strength buff. Oh wait, it's a beer charisma buff. Wait, what brand was that? No, I'm sorry, that's a hunting buff. I'm not kidding, it's literally that bad. Buffs, bonuses, boosters, healing items, etc. are all contained in the weirdest places and will come from the weirdest sources. Which, once again, would be fine if this was a video game and you as the game master were the computer, but you're a human being, not a computer. You have to focus on important things to a role-playing game. Things like the scene, the story, situations going on, those kind of things. You don't have time to track every random additional bonus a player might have got because they found an empty Coca-Cola bottle in the parking lot. So, clock where we're at right now. We have poorly balanced and incomplete basic rules that you're going to have to fix. Gratuitous bookkeeping for things that you're going to end up ignoring anyways. Stupid, nonsensical buffs, which will screw with the most basic role in the most random ways possible. But it doesn't stop there. Every violation of good game design was made from here on. Charts and tables to slow the action down. Missing and poorly conceived rules. Proprietary dice. Important charts and tables that simply don't exist. Or are contained in other products that you need to go buy in order to use, despite the fact there are pages of rules on how to use them in this book. What I'm trying to say, this isn't just lazy, it's bad game design on every level. It's clear this game was made for an audience of one, Steve from marketing. Zero effort was made to make an actual functional game. Instead, every effort was made to satisfy the guys at both marketing and accounting, and not the actual players. If this was a video game, it wouldn't be a B title. It wouldn't be mindless shovelware. It wouldn't even be an lazy asset flip. This is a predatory phone game with spyware and pay-to-win mechanics with only a vague hint of the Fallout IP strung over a lazy rebrand of Candy Crush. What I'm trying to say, these rules are bad, and the development team should feel bad for making them. Which is why for rules, this game is lucky to get a 3. Okay, final analysis. If you're a serious tabletop role player and you're looking in the world of Fallout, would I recommend you buying this game? No! As I said before, you're looking to buy this book for yourself or your friends as a novelty that you can put on a shelf and just take down and look at occasionally. It's great. Does that job expertly. go for it. But if you want an actual functional Fallout role-playing game that's well written, that you and your friends can play for years to come, you're either going to have to heavily modify these rules, or use a completely different rule system entirely. Which, because my players are going to want to play this, is what I'm going to start doing next week, when I'm starting my own personal journey into turning Modiphius Press's tabletop Fallout rules into something's actual playable at my tabletop. So if you're curious to see what actual game design looks like when it's focused around gameplay and balance and not marketing, tune in next week where you can watch me endure my pain as I try and turn this into an actual functional game. And that's a review of Fallout 2D20. Alright, if you actually like Fallout 2D20 and you don't agree with my review, great. Everyone deserves their own opinion. Leave your comment down below and tell me how I got it wrong. I'm great with it. As I said before, we love to learn here, so school me. And if you don't like this game and you think I missed some stuff, tell me what I missed, because honestly, this is one of the few games I've ever read where I actually wanted the developers in the room so I could scream at them. So if I missed something, let me know what I missed. And that's it for now. We'll be back to making our regular content shortly, and should have another video coming to you real soon. So until next time, good luck and good gaming.